I wasn't quite sure whether I would be next in line, but I'm with you now, so I'm ready. Let me also echo the introductory words of Alf. I think this is an important event, and I must also acknowledge the brave work that the activists in Turkey and elsewhere have embarked on. It is not an easy task, and they face, I'm sure, numerous threats and challenges. Let me start by saying I also bring you warm greetings from the President of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers in South Africa, Mr. Mvuso Notezi, and also all our members of our association who join everybody in solidarity in the struggle for justice and freedom in Turkey. A discussion on the importance of upholding the rule of law in Turkey is intertwined with the role and ever-growing powers of the President of Turkey. The greater the power of the President, the weaker is the strength of the rule of law until the one extinguishes the other. Turkey has a history that has filled volumes in libraries around the world. It is often seen as the umbilical cord between East and West in Europe, and is also symbolic of the great divide within the world, namely the East-West divide. I must say that Mother Africa has been squeezed into the North-South divide, and we are in between. When Constantinople fell in 1453, you see, I know a little bit of history here, Turkey became a force that reverberated throughout the centuries thereafter. It impacted on world and regional affairs in many ways, some small but more often with significant effect. In this third millennium, President Erdogan started out as a modern and progressive leader. That's what I believe. And mine, I must emphasize, is a perspective from South Africa. So bear with me if I'm being complimentary where I might not have to be. And started out, as I said, as a modern and progressive leader and shifted course over 2 presidential terms in order to deflect attention away from his questionable conduct and his strong critics. He set himself on the path towards a form of modern-day dictatorship while strengthening his hold over a weakened and subservient parliament. Erdogan thus wields widespread power over the masses of the people via his influence over the army, intelligence, and the police services. This could only have been kept in check by a strong and independent judiciary, which sadly does not exist today. In any modern democracy, the rule of law is balanced by the one arm of the government, namely the judiciary, which acts as a guardian of all the rights of the people against the potential unjust or unfair actions of the executive and legislature, which form the other 2 arms of government. The importance of an independent judiciary cannot be emphasized enough in order to ensure a strong adherence to the rule of law. Politicians have a somewhat superficial understanding of the role of a judiciary, and most times expect the judiciary to interpret and apply the law as it is written and passed by the legislature. The strength of the judiciary, therefore, is greatly dependent on the requirements for the appointment and removal of members of the judiciary. It is difficult to find in any democratic country processes which are totally independent of and not under varying degrees of control by the executive and the legislature in respect of the appointment of judges. The more independent the processes for the appointment and removal of judges, the stronger is the rule of law. A longer discussion on this vast topic is not called for here, save to say that the role of the judiciary is crucial in the battle against unjust rule, as it is the last barrier against dictatorship and military rule. It follows that Power-hungry or desperate leaders of democratic countries will seek many ways to emasculate the judiciary through different ways. History has illustrated some of the ways that this has happened, especially over the last century. The one method popularly used is a state of emergency. This is declared when there is a threat or a perceived threat to the institutions of the state and its people from either an external force or an internal threat. The events of July 15, 2016, involving a purported coup by a few members of the Turkish army, which at best can be described as worst planned, or as others might say, stage managed by Erdogan himself. The tragic consequences for hundreds of people who lost their lives by coming out into the streets set the stage for the collapse of the rule of law in Turkey. A then somewhat credible democratic government was turned into, within days, an authoritarian one. President Erdogan was able to use emergency powers to usurp the legislative and judicial powers and rule by decree. The parliament was bypassed and the judiciary rendered impotent and an extended tool of oppression. A facade of the rule of law remains today in respect of commercial and non-political legal matters. However, anyone who is deemed to be an opponent, not necessarily of the state, but of Erdogan and his pliant government, can and will be arrested and detained, and most often times with assaults and torture to follow. If they are fortunate to survive the ordeal of detention, they will be charged under draconian and unjust laws as decreed by the state. When they are brought to court to be prosecuted, their convictions are a matter of formality and the sentences are severe. The judiciary has become complicit in this tyranny. Turkey presents a false sense of adhering to the rule of law to the world. In this digital age of free-flowing information via social media and numerous networks, fake news, misinformation, and lies can be strongly advocated and promoted, thereby enabling dictators, mass murderers, and tyrants to perpetuate unjust rule with impunity. Turkey, therefore, cannot, in my respectful view, be separated or divorced from the global realities and geopolitical forces that pose an existential threat to almost every inhabitant of this world. Unfortunately, Turkey is also mired in this murky world of warfare and underworld of political intrigue, kidnappings, assassinations, and disappearances. Turkey, like other oppressive regimes, exists within a new world order underpinned by the rise of unilateralism, nationalism, religious factionalism, ethnicity, racism, tribalism, subjugation of minorities, violence against women, excesses of the extraction mining industry, and the irreversible environmental destruction of Mother Earth. Add to this the many other forms of discrimination and class oppression faced by the poor and dispossessed throughout many parts of the world, and the consequences of pandemics, climate change, and the dark cyber world of artificial intelligence. Turkey pretends to be better than many during these times of human failure on such a monumental global level. And it exists under that radar. Erdogan is thus able to survive thus far and pursue his grandiose dreams of world leadership for himself under this ominous global cloud of doom. As an aside, let me say that South Africa, my great country, offers a beacon of hope to the world by moving to a peaceful transition from one of humanity's worst oppressive systems, under the leadership of the courageous visionaries Oliver Tambo and Nelson Mandela. However, despite our internationally recognized constitution, which gave rise to our strong constitutional democracy, our rule of law is also under threat at this time. This is a matter for discussion on another day. Allow me to highlight some of the geopolitical tensions between the global superpowers that have impacted upon the struggles for self-determination, justice, peace, and human survival across the globe, and given Erdogan the room to maneuver. In all of these areas, the rule of law has been violated with impunity under UN's prescripts, international law, and where there existed even domestic laws. Let me mention a few sites of such struggles, namely, 1, Western Sahara and their people struggle for self-determination. 2, the minority Tamil people struggle for justice and self-determination against a Sinhalese majority in Sri Lanka, having been subjected to genocide, war crimes, and much more from the ruling Buddhist Sinhalese militarized majority. 3, Myanmar and Burma, where the Rohingya people faced the same genocidal styled attacks, coincidentally from a Buddhist military-controlled democratic regime. 4, Palestine, of course, and its cries of "let me breathe," while the knee of Israel is firmly down on its neck. 5, Kashmir, which has little choice in determining its undecided future since the formation of the states of India and Pakistan more than 70 years ago. 6, Kurdistan, and many more parts in Europe. And lastly, I'll broadly refer to the Middle East, Africa, and Americas, and not to forget Yemen in the Middle East. In all of these areas, all of these countries, there are immense struggles for survival and self-determination that is ongoing. These just struggles are based on the rule of law, I must emphasize. They started with formations of elders, moving to community organizations, then to political parties, and finally to underground movements for liberation. These evolved in a progressive manner, taking decades in some cases and shorter periods in others. The rule of law was respected by the people fighting for justice, who embarked on programs of petitions, then forming delegations, reporting back, continuing negotiations, protesting, mobilizing, and resorting to nonviolence, civil disobedience, and then finally being driven to resort to armed struggle. In all of this, the United Nations General Assembly, the UN Security Council, and in the past few decades, even the UN Human Rights Council has attempted to resolve these conflicts by attempting to apply international law without success. And this is because of what I call, as what we often refer to as geopolitics. It is not the laws of or the evidence that is lacking to resolve the disputes in a just manner based on truth and fact. It is simply that, including the UN Charter on Human Rights and all the UN conventions that were passed and adopted, that these are unenforceable because of the veto powers that are held by what is commonly known as the superpowers. And as we know, if one of them does not agree with any resolution that is being sought to bring justice to bear on any country, nothing is passed. The hope of the new post-World War UN as a just arbiter of disputes was slowly eroded as a result and is all but non-existent, especially after the 9/11 events and also in this present third millennium. The world has been divided into voting blocs, with each group serving its own selfish interest, thereby giving rise to pliant, corrupt regimes that can wage war on its own people with impunity, committing gross violations of human rights, war crimes, and even genocide in furtherance of the strategic interests of their surrogate patrons, be it the United States of America, China, Russia, India, Britain, or some other power. These geopolitical power blocks have become international voting blocks, as seen within the UN and even the UN Human Rights Council. Erdogan seems to believe that Turkey can form a voting bloc within these greater blocs. In the final analysis, therefore, only the brave people of Turkey can reverse the tide against themselves and restore the rule of law for all its people and regain legitimacy in the eyes of the world as a truly great nation, achieving success and prosperity in a non-sectarian and just manner. In this quest, the good people of the world, no matter how small in number, will stand with all those persons in exile, in prison, and outside prison, and all those brave Turks fighting for justice, peace, prosperity, and unity for all in Turkey.